Chapter 1. The blaring wail of a police siren cut through the quiet morning air just as I hit the button to open my garage door. I froze, confused, as the heavy metal panels lifted with a mechanical groan. Before I could even step inside, Karen, my HOA president and full-time neighborhood menace, came charging across the street, arms flailing like she'd caught me mid-bank robbery. "There! That's the car! He stole my car! He's trying to drive it away!" she screamed, pointing directly at my garage. I blinked, utterly bewildered. "What are you talking about, Karen? That's my car. I've had it for 5 years." But she didn't care. She was already on the phone with 911, shrieking into the receiver. "Send the police immediately. My neighbor is trying to seize my brand new car. He broke into my garage." Brand new car? Seize? My jaw dropped. This wasn't some minor HOA fine over trash cans or lawn decorations. This was outright insanity. Within minutes, 2 squad cars came rolling into our cul-de-sac, lights flashing, sirens silenced as they skidded to a stop. Neighbors gathered on porches, clutching coffee mugs, whispering. Karen waved her arms frantically at the officers. "That's him! Arrest him! He's a thief!" The officers turned toward me. "Sir, step away from the vehicle." "Officers," I said, raising my hands calmly. "This is my garage, my property. And that car?" I pointed at my midnight blue pickup truck. "That's mine, registered in my name, paid off years ago." Karen gasped theatrically. "Don't believe him. He hacked into my paperwork. He must have switched the registration. I just bought that exact same truck from the dealership yesterday." One officer exchanged a skeptical glance with the other. "Ma'am, are you saying this truck belongs to you?" "Yes," she shrieked. "Check the plates. Check the VIN. It's mine." At that point, I realized just how far she was willing to go. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a calculated stunt. Karen had been gunning for me ever since I refused to join her beautification committee and told her she had no authority to dictate what color mulch I used. Now, she was trying to frame me as a car thief in front of half the neighborhood. I pulled my wallet from my pocket and handed the officer my registration card. "Run the VIN, officer. You'll see my name on every line." Karen laughed hysterically, the sound grating and desperate. "Don't let him trick you. He's a con artist. Arrest him now before he drives off with my car." The garage light flickered above us as the officer read the card. His expression didn't change, but I could see Karen's confidence waver for a split second. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "if you just bought this car, do you have the paperwork? Proof of purchase? A bill of sale?" Karen froze. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "Well, I had it in my bag." "Yes, but he must have stolen that too." The crowd of neighbors murmured louder now, whispers turning into laughter. Everyone knew Karen was dramatic, but this was next level. I folded my arms. "Officers, I've had enough of this harassment. First, she calls code enforcement on me for having a flower pot she doesn't like. Then she fines me for leaving my trash can out for 20 minutes. And now she's accusing me of stealing my own car?" The officer nodded slowly. "We'll verify the VIN, sir. If everything checks out, this is going in our report." Karen stomped her foot like a child denied candy. No, you don't understand. He's dangerous. He's targeting me. He wants me out of the neighborhood." The other officer sighed. "Ma'am, making a false police report is a crime. If this VIN matches his registration, you'll be the one facing charges." For the first time since I'd known her, Karen went completely silent. Her face drained of color and she stared at me with a mix of hatred and panic. And in that moment I realized something important. This wasn't just about a car. Karen had declared war. Chapter 2. The blue and red lights still pulsed faintly in my mind even after the police cars rolled away. I stood in my driveway, arms crossed, watching as Karen stormed back to her pristine 2-story house with her entourage of HOA board members trailing behind her like a pack of hyenas. Her shrill voice carried across the street as she muttered about unlawful vehicle seizures and further legal action. It was all smoke and mirrors, but the way she tried to spin every situation into an opportunity for dominance was infuriating. I leaned against my garage door, staring at the perfectly legal, fully paid-off SUV sitting inside. My SUV. Registered in my name. Insured under my policy. Yet Karen, with her twisted sense of entitlement, had convinced herself that somehow it was hers, or worse, that she could weaponize the HOA rules and local authorities to make it hers. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house made me wonder if Karen was planning her next move. I wasn't paranoid. It was experience. With Karen, there was always a next move. She had this uncanny ability to escalate minor disagreements into all-out wars. I had seen her try to fine a family for having their Christmas lights up 2 days past New Year's. She once called the cops on a neighbor's teenage son because his basketball hoop disturbed the neighborhood aesthetic. Now, she had set her sights on me. The next morning, I decided to get ahead of the storm. I drove down to the police department with every document I could gather. The bill of sale for the SUV, the registration, insurance, and even the financing documents from the dealership. I wanted everything lined up so that when Karen inevitably filed some sort of complaint, the cops would see the truth instantly. Detective Alvarez, the officer who had been called the night before, greeted me with a tired smile. "I figured I'd see you in her." He said. "Karen's already called twice this morning." "Twice?" I nearly laughed. "She claims you somehow swindled her out of a vehicle she purchased. But when we checked, the VIN she gave us doesn't match the car in your garage. Her story's falling apart, but she's determined to make this stick." That was the thing about Karen. Logic never stopped her. If anything, the harder reality pushed back, the louder she screamed. Still, Alvarez's calm tone reassured me. "As far as we're concerned, your paperwork clears you completely. Just be prepared. I wouldn't be surprised if she drags this into civil court. She likes to make noise, and judges can't ignore a filing even if it's baseless." "Good to know," I said grimly. When I pulled back into my driveway later that morning, the scene waiting for me made my blood boil. Karen stood there with 2 HOA board members, clipboards in hand, snapping photos of my property. They weren't subtle about it either. She wanted me to see. She wanted me to feel like I was under siege. "What now, Karen?" I asked, stepping out of my truck. "This driveway is technically common property," she sneered. "The HOA has authority to regulate vehicles parked here. If you're hiding stolen goods in your garage, then that falls under our jurisdiction." I burst out laughing, unable to hold it back. "Stolen goods? Karen, you've lost your mind. You don't have jurisdiction over my garage, my car, or my life. You can't just make up rules as you go." She flushed red, clearly unused to being laughed at so openly. "We'll see about that. I've already scheduled an emergency HOA meeting for tonight. Don't be late. It concerns your violations." "Violations?" I shot back. "The only violation here is your abuse of authority." The board members shifted uncomfortably. I could tell even they were tired of being her puppets, but Karen had a way of strong-arming people into compliance. That night, I sat in the HOA clubhouse surrounded by my neighbors. Karen presided at the front of the room like a self-appointed judge, slamming her gavel dramatically. "This meeting is now in session to address the unlawful possession of property and continued non-compliance by Mr. Parker." "Unlawful possession of what?" I interrupted. "You're making false accusations." She raised a hand. "Silence, please. You'll have your chance to speak." The smugness in her tone made my fists clench, but I forced myself to stay calm. Losing my temper would only play into her hands. Karen launched into a speech about how the neighborhood's image was being tarnished by criminal behavior, and how the HOA had the authority to act where local law enforcement was slow and ineffective. It was laughable, but I could see the unease it stirred in some of the neighbors. People didn't like conflict. They didn't want to choose sides. That was Karen's specialty: use intimidation and half-truths until silence became complicity. When it was my turn, I stood tall and spread the documents I had brought. "Here is the title, registration, and insurance for the SUV in question, all in my name. The police have already confirmed everything is legitimate. Karen is wasting everyone's time." Murmurs spread through the room. A couple of neighbors even nodded, but Karen slammed her gavel again. "Regardless, the HOA has the right to impose fines for the disturbance you've caused, and until this matter is resolved, we demand you keep that vehicle out of sight." There it was, her real goal: control. She didn't care about the truth, she just wanted to humiliate me. "Not happening," I said firmly. "You don't get to dictate what I park in my garage. That's not in the bylaws, and you know it. The meeting descended into chaos after that, neighbors shouting back and forth. Some supported me, others just wanted peace, but the tension was undeniable. When it finally ended, Karen cornered me in the parking lot. Her eyes gleamed with malice. "You think you've won? You have. No idea what's coming. That car will be mine, or it will be gone. Mark my words." I leaned in close so only she could hear. "Try me, Karen. Just try me." And for the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Hesitation. But it lasted only a second. As I drove home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to escalate to a level even I wasn't prepared for. Karen was plotting something bigger, and I had to be ready. Chapter 3. The morning after Karen's ridiculous 911 stunt, I walked into my garage with a heavy heart but a firm resolve. The officers from the night before had left, shaking their heads, embarrassed to even be part of her nonsense. Still, Karen wasn't the type to back down after losing face. She was wounded, humiliated in front of neighbors who peeked through blinds as police cars flashed red and blue down the street. And when someone like Karen got embarrassed, retaliation was guaranteed. I wasn't wrong. At exactly 7:15 a.m., and as I sipped my first cup of coffee, I heard the screech of cheap flip-flops storming up my driveway. Then came the banging on my door. Not a knock, but the kind of pounding that could wake the dead. I opened it to find Karen standing there wild-eyed, holding a clipboard. "You think last night was funny?" she hissed. "Calling my bluff? Making me look insane in front of law enforcement?" I kept my face calm. "Karen, you did look insane. You called 911 because I opened my own garage. That car belongs to me," she snapped, jabbing her finger at my chest. "I paid for it. I signed the paperwork." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because my name's on the title, my loan, my insurance, my garage." Karen's lips curled into a smile, the kind of smile that wasn't joy, but venom. "You'll regret this." Then she slammed her clipboard against my chest and stormed off. When I looked down, I realized what she'd left me, a notice of violation from the HOA. According to the document, I had allegedly stored unauthorized property in public view, referring to the car in my garage. The kicker? She fined me $500. That's
When it hit me, Karen had pivoted. If the cops couldn't touch me, she'd weaponize the HOA instead. By noon, I received 3 more violations. One claimed my trash bins weren't pulled in on time, even though they were. Another said my lawn was 2 inches over regulation height. My grass was cut the day before. The last one accused me of operating a commercial business from my property, simply because I had tools in my garage. Karen was on a warpath and she was papering me to death. But what Karen didn't realize was that I wasn't the kind of neighbor who backed down. I kept every single notice, every voicemail, every text she left threatening me. I photographed my yard, my bins, my car, and even the timestamps on my security cameras. Each false claim was documented, and every fabricated violation became evidence. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I walked to the mailbox. Neighbors gathered in their yards, whispering about the spectacle from last night. Some shook their heads sympathetically. Others smirked as if waiting for more drama. And then Karen appeared, marching down the street in a neon workout suit, clipboard under her arm like a sword of justice. She stopped right in front of me and shouted loud enough for the entire block to hear, "This man stole my car. He's hiding it in his garage, and if the police won't help me, the HOA will." Gasps rippled through the neighbors. I turned slowly and looked her dead in the eye. "Karen," I said calmly, "the only thing I'm hiding is how much of a fool you're making of yourself. But if you keep pushing this, I won't be the only one with paperwork to show." Her face went red, then purple. "You wouldn't dare." I smirked. "Try me." The following week became a chess match. Karen filed complaint after complaint, desperate to force me into submission. But I countered every move with documentation. HOA meetings turned out into battlefields where she'd rant and wave her clipboard, only to be silenced by my neat folder of evidence that exposed her lies. Each time she thought she had me cornered, I pulled the rug out from under her. Still, Karen wasn't backing down. Her obsession grew darker.
She started lingering near my driveway, snapping pictures of my car with her phone. She stalked my mail deliveries, whispered to neighbors that I was some kind of criminal. One night, I caught her standing at the edge of my property with binoculars, peering into my garage window like a deranged private eye. That was the final straw. I printed out all my evidence, the false violations, the harassment, the security footage, and walked straight into the county clerk's office. With steady hands, I filed a harassment report and requested a restraining order. When the paperwork was stamped and official, I felt something I hadn't felt since this madness began: control. 2 nights later, there was a knock at Karen's door. I watched from my porch as a sheriff's deputy handed her a thick envelope. Her face twisted as she tore it open, reading the words that spelled out her downfall. She looked up, scanning the street, until her eyes landed on me. I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast. For the first time, Karen didn't shout. She didn't threaten. She didn't even move. She just stood frozen, as if her entire empire of clipboards and fines had crumbled in an instant. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. People like Karen didn't surrender. They plotted. And something in her cold stare told me she was already scheming her next move. The question was, how far would she go? Chapter 4. I thought things might calm down after Karen's humiliating 911 stunt, but I should have known better. Karen was the kind of person who never accepted defeat. She only saw it as a challenge to escalate. And escalate she did. It started on a Tuesday morning. I had just returned from a night shift at the plant, exhausted but relieved that I'd finally get some rest. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. There were papers taped to my garage door, neatly typed, laminated against the weather, and plastered across the wood like wanted posters. At first I thought it might be some delivery mistake, but as I got closer I saw the bold heading, Notice of HOA Property Seizure. I froze. My blood boiled as I ripped one of the sheets down. The letter claimed that because I had stolen Karen's car, yes, the very same baseless accusation she made when I opened my garage, the HOA had voted to seize control of my garage and all assets contained within until the matter was properly investigated. I laughed out loud at the absurdity. My garage? My tools? My property? Since when did the HOA have the right to seize anything? They could fine me, sure. They could threaten lawsuits, yes, but seizing private property? That wasn't even legal. I stormed into the house fuming and called my neighbor Tom. "Hey, did you see this garbage they posted on my garage?" I asked. Tom chuckled bitterly. "Yeah, I saw Karen and 2 other board members sneaking around last night with tape and a stapler. I figured they were up to no good. She's rallying the board against you, man. She wants you out." "Out of what? My own house?" I snapped. "That's Karen," Tom sighed. "She's been trying to play queen of the neighborhood ever since she became HOA president. She thinks she owns us." I sat down at my kitchen table reading the notice again. I realized something important. This wasn't just Karen being a nuisance. This was a test. If I let her pull this off, she'd keep pushing until I had nothing left. And that's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight her with anger. I was going to fight her with the one thing Karen couldn't stand: facts and exposure. The next day, I attended the monthly HOA meeting. The room was already buzzing when I walked in. Karen sat at the head of the long folding table, smug and smiling like she'd already won. "Ah, Mr. Thompson," she said with fake sweetness. "So glad you could join us. We were just discussing your situation." I crossed my arms. "Good. Let's talk about it. Because I saw the notice you posted on my garage. You do realize that's illegal, right?" Karen tilted her head, her voice dripping with condescension. "Illegal? No, dear. It's within our rights as the homeowners association to protect the community. You've been hiding stolen property in your garage." The room erupted in murmurs. Some neighbors looked shocked. Others looked embarrassed. But Karen thrived on drama, and she pressed on. "Per our bylaws," she continued, holding up a binder like it was the Constitution itself, "we reserve the right to seize suspicious property until due diligence has been performed, and that car, it was just purchased, wasn't it? yet it mysteriously appears in your possession. The timing is too convenient." I slammed my hand on the table. "That car is mine. I've got the title, the receipt, the insurance, all in my name. You can't just claim otherwise because it doesn't fit your little fantasy." Karen smirked. "Then prove it." That was her trap. She wanted me to get flustered, to stumble, to lose my temper. But instead of arguing, I reached into my folder and pulled out a thick stack of papers. "Here's the proof," I said, spreading them across the table. "Title, bill of sale, registration, every single document with my name on it. You wanted facts? There they are. Now tell me again how this is Karen's car." The room went silent. A few neighbors leaned in to glance at the documents. Tom smirked in the back row, clearly enjoying Karen's discomfort. Karen's face reddened. She shuffled her papers, looking for something, anything, to regain control. Well, that doesn't explain why you refused to open your garage when I demanded it," she stammered. "Because you're not the police," I shot back. "You don't have the authority to search my property, Karen. Last I checked, you're not law enforcement. You're just an HOA president with a clipboard." The crowd chuckled and Karen's composure cracked. Her lips tightened and she slammed her binder shut. "This meeting is adjourned," she barked, storming out of the room. But here's the thing, Karen wasn't done. Not by a long shot. That night, I heard footsteps outside my house around midnight. I peeked through the blinds and saw Karen pacing near my driveway, whispering into her phone. She was pointing at my garage, gesturing wildly as if she were giving someone directions. And then headlights appeared at the end of the street. A tow truck. Karen was actually trying to tow my car out of my garage. I grabbed my phone and hit record. This time I wasn't just going to stop her, I was going to expose her for the whole neighborhood to see. As the tow truck backed into my driveway, Karen marched up to my garage with the confidence of a dictator. But when I flicked on the floodlights, she froze like a deer caught in headlights. "Smile, Karen," I said, holding up my phone. "You're live on camera." Her face drained of color, and that's when I knew I had her exactly where I wanted her. Chapter 5. By the next morning, word of Karen's meltdown had spread through the entire neighborhood like wildfire. Some neighbors were chuckling about it, others were sympathetic but secretly relieved it wasn't them in her crosshairs, and a few whispered that maybe the HOA president had finally bitten off more than she could chew. For me, the whole ordeal was far from over. Karen had made one thing clear, she wasn't letting this go. I woke up to the sound of a car idling outside my house. Pulling back the blinds, I spotted Karen in her robe and slippers, coffee mug in hand, leaning against a brand-new black sedan parked at the curb. The same sedan she had claimed I stole the night before. She was glaring straight at my garage as though expecting me to spring out and snatch it away again. Her persistence was unsettling but also laughable. I decided to confront her directly, not in anger but with calm resolve. I stepped outside, deliberately making noise with my boots on the gravel so she couldn't accuse me of sneaking. "Karen," I called, "we need to talk like adults. What you did last night was dangerous. Calling 911 with a false report. You could have gotten me arrested, or worse." Karen's eyes narrowed and she crossed her arms. "Don't play innocent. You've been targeting me from the start. You waited for me to bring home my car and then you—" She stopped, searching for words, but her argument was crumbling. I could see doubt creeping in. She wanted to sound in control, but the truth was slipping through the cracks. "Karen," I said firmly, "I bought my car 6 years ago. The sheriff confirmed it last night. The officers ran the plates. Everything checked out. You need to let this go before you dig yourself deeper." But Karen wasn't Karen if she knew how to back down. "Oh, I'm not letting anything go. If the sheriff's office won't listen, then I'll take this to court. I'll get the HOA board to investigate. I'll expose you as the fraud you are." Her voice carried across the street, drawing a small audience. Curtains shifted, doors cracked open, and neighbors peeked out like it was Saturday morning entertainment. One of them, a retired Army sergeant named Hank, finally stepped forward. "Karen," he barked, "enough already. The man's telling the truth. We were here when he bought that car. Everyone knows it's his." Karen whipped around, stunned that someone would publicly side against her. "Stay out of this, Hank. This is between me and him." "No," Hank shot back. "It's between you and reality. You're embarrassing yourself, and all of us." That was the first time I saw genuine panic flash across Karen's face. She realized she was losing control of the narrative, and for a control freak like her, that was unbearable. She stormed back into her house, slamming the door so hard the porch light rattled. For a brief moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd finally retreat. But of course, Karen had other plans. By evening, I received an official-looking envelope slipped into my mailbox. No postage stamp, meaning she had put it there herself, which was technically a violation of postal regulations. Inside was a letter on HOA letterhead stamped with Karen's president's seal. It was a notice of community conduct violation. According to her, my hostile and threatening behavior toward her was grounds for a $500 fine and possible legal action. I laughed at the absurdity, but deep down, I knew I had to tread carefully. Karen had the HOA's paperwork at her fingertips, and while much of it was hot air, it could cause trouble if not challenged properly. I snapped photos of the letter, emailed them to my lawyer, and waited. Within hours, my attorney replied, "She doesn't have the authority to fine you personally without a board vote. This is harassment. Keep everything documented." The next day, I returned from work to find Karen waiting again. This time, she wasn't alone. 2 other board members stood by her side, Mr. Lewis, a meek accountant who avoided confrontation like the plague, and Mrs. Green, a stern retired teacher who usually sided with Karen on everything. Karen smirked when she saw me. "We're here to discuss your repeated violations, parking violations, garage misuse, threatening behavior. The board has had enough." I stood on my porch, arms crossed, listening. "Violations?" I asked calmly. "Or just whatever you made up this week?" Mrs. Green cleared her throat. "The president has the right to enforce community standards. If she believes you're endangering the neighborhood—" "That's where you're wrong," I cut in, pulling out my phone. "According to the bylaws, any fine or enforcement action requires a majority board vote. Not just the president's say-so. Am I correct, Mr. Lewis?" Lewis shifted uncomfortably. He knew the rules as well as I did. Finally, he muttered, "That is correct." Karen shot him a glare sharp enough to cut steel, but I pressed on. "So, unless you've held a vote, this letter she shoved in my mailbox is meaningless. And you know what else is illegal? Using HOA letterhead to issue false fines." The silence was delicious. Neighbors had gathered again, listening intently. They were tired of Karen's antics, but fear of retaliation usually kept them quiet. Tonight was different. Tonight they saw someone standing up to her, and winning. Karen's face turned red, her fists trembling. "This isn't over," she snapped. "You'll regret crossing me." But her allies weren't rallying behind her anymore. Mrs. Green looked uneasy. Lewis avoided her eyes. And the crowd? They were murmuring in agreement with me. Karen wasn't the queen of the cul-de-sac anymore. That night, as I sat in my living room, I realized something important. Karen's empire was crumbling. Not because I fought harder, but because the truth was finally exposing her lies. Still, I knew better than to let my guard down. When someone like Karen starts losing power, they don't just disappear quietly, they come back swinging. And sure enough, by the end of the week, she escalated her war to a level none of us had expected. She filed a formal police report, not just against me, but against the entire HOA board for failing to protect her property rights. She claimed that the sheriff's office had been compromised and demanded a full investigation into me personally. When the officers showed up at my door again, shaking their heads with weary smiles, I knew this was far from over. But this time, I wasn't just defending myself. I had the truth, the neighbors, and even cracks in her own board on my side. The battle with Karen had only just reached its peak, and the fallout would change the neighborhood forever. Chapter 6. The weeks that followed the incident with Karen's false police report were anything but quiet. Every time I thought things might settle down, she found another angle to attack me from. I had dealt with nosy HOA neighbors before, but Karen was something else entirely. A woman driven by obsession, greed, and a desperate need to control everyone around her. And this time, She wasn't just making noise. She was actively trying to ruin my life. One morning, I opened my garage to grab a few tools, only to find that someone had spray painted across my driveway in big red letters, "Thief." The word stretched from the edge of the sidewalk all the way up to the steps of my garage. It didn't take a detective to know who was behind it. Karen stood across the street, arms crossed, sipping her coffee with a smug little grin plastered on her face. She didn't even try to hide it anymore. "Cleaning that up won't hide what you did," she called out loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. "Everyone knows you stole my car." The absurdity of it almost made me laugh, but the truth was, it wasn't funny. Karen was poisoning the community against me. And every time I tried to explain my side of the story, someone else popped up with another rumor that she had spread. She was playing the long game, isolating me, making me the villain in the eyes of my own neighborhood. That evening, I got a knock on my door. It was Greg, one of the quieter neighbors. He looked uncomfortable, like he didn't even want to be there. "Listen," he said. "I don't know what it's going on between you and Karen, but she's telling everyone she has proof you're running some kind of chop shop out of your garage. Says you're selling stolen cars." I nearly choked. "A chop shop? In my garage? Greg, I can't even fit 2 cars in there." "She's completely lost it." He shrugged helplessly. "I believe you, but you might want to do something before this gets uglier. She's talking about calling in the HOA board to conduct an inspection." And there it was, the next move. Karen wasn't just trying to paint me as a criminal to the police, now she was trying to weaponize the HOA against me. She wanted to get inside my garage, dig around and manufacture whatever evidence she needed to support her fantasy. I knew I had to get ahead of her. So I reached out to Sheriff Daniels, the officer who had seen firsthand how Karen wasted police resources last time. I explained the new accusations, the graffiti, and the threats of an HOA inspection. The sheriff didn't mince words. "Look, we're already building a case against her for filing false reports, but if she starts dragging the HOA into this, things could get more complicated. Document everything. Pictures, videos, witnesses, whatever you can gather. If she escalates, we'll be ready." That night, I installed cameras around my property, front, back, and especially facing the garage. If Karen wanted a war, I was going to make sure I had the evidence this time. Sure enough, within a few days, the HOA board sent me a formal notice. It claimed they had received multiple complaints of suspicious activity around my garage and were requesting entry for an inspection. The letter wasn't signed by the full board, just Karen and one other member she had obviously manipulated into backing her. I wasn't about to roll over. I wrote back, citing the HOA bylaws word for word. "The association shall not enter or inspect any member while is private property without probable cause and a unanimous board vote." Their notice was both invalid and illegal. Karen, of course, exploded. She stormed over to my driveway the next morning while I was hosing down the graffiti, screaming about how I was hiding stolen property and defying the community rules. I didn't even respond. Instead, I pointed at the camera blinking above the garage door. Her face drained of color when she realized everything she said was being recorded. For once, she had no snappy comeback. She stormed off, muttering under her breath, but I knew this wasn't over, and I was right. Later that week, I received another knock on the door. This time, it wasn't a neighbor or the HOA. It was 2 men in suits, flashing federal badges. My stomach dropped. "We're here to ask a few questions about recent reports concerning vehicle theft in this area," one of them said. Karen had taken it federal. I let them in, showed them my spotless garage, the titles for every car I owned, and even the video footage of Karen harassing me and vandalizing my driveway. The agents exchanged looks, clearly annoyed, not at me but at the wild goose chase Karen had sent them on. "Sir," one of them said as they left, "it looks like you're the target of a malicious campaign. We'll be including this in our report." As soon as the door shut behind them, I let out the breath I'd been holding. Karen wasn't just desperate, she was reckless. And with the feds now aware of her stunts, I knew it was only a matter of time before the walls came crashing down around her. But I also knew Karen wasn't going to stop until she burned herself completely, and I had to be ready for whatever she tried next. Because this wasn't just about my garage anymore. This was about exposing Karen for who she really was, and making sure she could never pull this stunt on anyone else again. Chapter 7. The HOA neighborhood never felt the same after that morning. Word had spread faster than fire through dry brush. Everyone knew that Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, had tried to use 911 as our personal weapon, and failed spectacularly. Yet for me, the story wasn't finished. Because people like her didn't just give up. They plotted, they schemed, they waited for another chance to strike. I realized that if I wanted peace in my own neighborhood, I couldn't just defend myself anymore. I had to go on the offense. That meant digging deeper, exposing her hypocrisy, and making sure the HOA itself was held accountable for allowing someone like her to run unchecked for years. It didn't take long before the cracks started to show. Neighbors came to me privately telling me stories. How Karen fined them for flower pots being too colorful. How she trespassed to measure grass height with a ruler. How she even demanded one family remove their American flag because it disrupted uniformity. The more I listened, the more it became obvious. She had been using the HOA like her personal kingdom, and everyone had been too scared or too tired to fight back. That fear ended now. I gathered every complaint, every fine letter, every photo, every audio clip. With my son, who was more than happy to help after seeing how far Karen had gone with her 911 stunt, we assembled a file so large it could crush the HOA board in one sitting. Then we sent it not just to the state's housing authority, but to local news stations hungry for a story of corruption, power abuse, and one woman's out-of-control ego. The fallout was nuclear. When the news crew arrived in our subdivision, cameras rolling, Karen stormed out of her house in her usual dramatic fashion, yelling about fake stories and smear campaigns. But the evidence spoke louder than her shrieking ever could. Clip after clip played on the evening news, her trespassing, her screaming, her demanding special treatment. Then came the kicker, her 911 stunt. The body cam footage of the officers telling her she had wasted emergency serve. ICE's. Watching her face twisted in denial on TV was the final nail in the coffin. By the next HOA meeting, the tide had fully turned. Neighbors who once cowered in silence now stood tall, demanding her resignation. Some shouted, some simply raised their voices with trembling but undeniable courage. And for once, Karen had no power to silence them. The board voted unanimously to remove her. She tried to fight, screaming about lawyers and retaliation. But even the board had grown tired of her antics. They stripped her title, removed her voting power, and banned her from holding any future HOA position. But that wasn't the real victory. The real victory came when peace returned to the neighborhood. Families started using their yards again. Kids played freely. People smiled when they walked past each other instead of whispering about fines and rules. For the first time in years, the subdivision felt like a community, not a prison camp. As for me, I never forgot the lesson Karen had forced me to learn. Some people thrive on control, and if you give them an inch, they'll take your whole life. But if you stand your ground, if you push back with truth, with evidence, with unity, they fall apart. The day I stood in my garage, watching the sun rise over my driveway without fear of fines, threats, or Karen's voice echoing through the street, I knew something had changed forever. Karen thought she could call 911 and destroy me with lies. Instead, she destroyed her own empire. And me? I was finally free. Ending line. Karen's reign of terror ended not with the power of her voice, but with the strength of a community that finally stood together. And as I closed my garage that night, one truth echoed louder than anything she had ever screamed. Bullies only win until someone fights back.